All right, we are here this evening with Tom, Katie, and myself, and we're going to review Tom's Artifact 2. We're starting with 2A. I'm going to start with 2A. Tom, connecting throughout the paper, suggesting that detail a little more in your paragraphs from, in reading the article, it had a paragraph, and then it was another paragraph. I thought connecting it and making it flow from point to point. Now, your points were developed throughout the paper, and as far as it being in content in line with the course content and appropriate external sources, you had 10 sources, you had the facts. But in the reading of your actual paper, I didn't see where you were connecting it back and forth from your works cited to inside the paper. Has the rubric been fully unpacked? The paper is not fully developed at this point because of that fact. You didn't not tying me back into what you're talking about. Now you had, as far as your stuff that you attached with it, you had your artifacts, which your articles were attached as well. So I could reference through it that way. Grammar and spelling, everything, format and spelling, everything was great. It looked good. I give you a 3 on that. Again, on organization, I put the paper could use some transitions in it from one paragraph to another to help with the reading, because it sort of jumped from one topic to the next topic, and it was hard for me to follow along with what it was. Where descriptors align with the descriptors, the descriptors were addressed looking at the rubric. I could look at and read the descriptors and know that you were meeting the descriptor in that as far as what needed to be addressed. Again, references, I give you a 2 on it. Make references in the text portion of the artifact to draw attention to your works cited page. Tom, I believe that this with just a few revisions, this paper will be complete for 2A to be done and ready to submit for review. I think it's a great start. It's organized. You obviously have spent some time with it.
All right, so 2B was the visual checklist. And on the visual checklist, I put it there. It seems to reflect your 2A best practices that you had written about in there. And kind of going back to what Jay said, if they were organized, like maybe the headings would be good for that. But that was aligned with your checklist. And you show most of the components of the rubric. If you just want to get accomplished, you could add that you presented this to the SIT team. But right now you're at proficient.
Student improvement team.
It's school improvement team. The PLC discussion and the minutes that you had included in your appendix was the quality was good, and then that referenced back to your checklist. And the narrative that you wrote showed a true discussion that you had in PLC. The only thing that I would change for your mechanics and grammar is just make sure instead of putting figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, I would put appendix instead of that, because that's kind of what we've stuck with. And then the organization, the structure looked good. And then I put that there was no descriptors for this artifact. And all the references were, well, there were no references to be cited. But you could cite Marzano if you wanted to, maybe in your intro to kind of carry from 2A. I guess that's it for 2B.
All right, scroll down to 2.
It's right here.
Okay, for 2C, I had put content in line with what have we discussed this so far this semester. You can tell that you work well with others and develop the document the process and utilizing the checklist for best practices from component B. These actual practices are in school. In addition, the candidate, okay, I highlight this part in this comment for the rubric. In addition, the candidate will provide evidence of sharing the gap analysis with school leadership team. Make sure you include this if you want accomplished, for it to go to the next step, for it to be an exceptional piece. Quality, the narrative is there, but I would include the best practices created in your Artifact 2B, tie it all together, because when you want to tie A, B, C, D, and E together, you're going to have to reference back and forth from one to the next. Mechanics, of course, everything looked good there. Suggest that you reword the headings in your organization. Reword your headings a little bit so I can see how it adds as far as what they give us for guides to go by. Make sure those headings are more pronounced in that section. No descriptors with this artifact. No references to or cite it. I would, again, like Katie was saying, Rosano, since it is in the narrative, you had mentioned it in your narrative, make reference to it again.
All right, so 2D talked about opportunities for empowerment within your school. So I just said that the narrative is sufficient, but you could bring it into more play more in your class readings. So each requirement was touched on about the candidate with the rubric, because all the rubric said was that the candidate works with others, which you showed, and you identified the gaps from C and used that to create a rationale for this artifact. The quality was good. There's a formal style, and the headings and the rubric requirements were touched upon. So that was really good. And then I put for mechanics and grammar, it was very professionally written, and there wasn't any mistakes. The headings were good. They aligned with the rubric requirements, and there was no descriptors for this section, and there was also no references that were addressed.
All right, so 2E, summing it all up. Okay, summing up the action plan requires more detailed narrative and review of all parts of the artifact. This is where we want to tie in everything that you told me in A, B, and C, and D at the end. So you need to sum that up a little bit more. You applied the contents to each rubric requirement, but depth in application, you didn't have much depth in it. You just give me the bare minimum to hit that. If you went into a little more depth, it would clearly set you where you need to be for your writing was clean. It's clean, neat. It's very clear as a writer's your purpose and meaning. Yeah, I could get that from reading your paper. Organization, you need more content would fill and meet the requirements of the order. In other words, you have like a shell, you need to give me a little more meat with it. Descriptors are headings, so the intent is present with more detailed narrative and action plans content. Each descriptor will be gained in gesture. There was no references on that section as well.